one thing I do know personally, and I just think through observation, is humans don't do particularly well by themselves all the time. And community is of high value. Even if it's 3 days a week, even if it's whatever, you just have to give people a reason to come together.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews.
Hello and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. This is the show that gets you in front of your best audience and keeps you there. If this is your first time, you're in for a treat. And if you've been supporting the show for any length of time, thank you very much for that. Now, on today's show, I have the pleasure of welcoming author, founder and CEO at Workng, Mr. Mike Fransen. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolute pleasure to have you here. And we're going to be talking about the future of work, how the office sector has changed forever, and how your business Workng helps effectively manage all aspects of assets and property management. So there's a lot to unpack here. Now, I'm wondering if we can just start off by finding out a little bit about you. This is customary for us to spend that bit of time. So where are you calling in from today?
I am calling in from Northwest Houston. So here in Houston is where we call home. Been here about a little over 16 years.
Tell us a little bit about the place. What's a landmark? What do you love about living there?
You know, I think it sounds cliche, but I'd say for us, it's the people. I did not grow up here. I am what they call a Texan by marriage. And so I actually grew up on the West Coast. So I grew up in Oregon and bounced around, went to school in New York, was in the Army for 5 years, went back to school in the Northeast, and we're in Texas. So people are what keep us here.
I was going to ask you about your time in the Army because I always think about what it takes to be disciplined enough to make that decision, yet let alone go through it. What was it like?
If I'm being honest, and I think a lot of people probably share the sentiment, the further I'm away from it, the more I appreciate what it represented for my growth, for what I was. And, you know, in some ways it's probably good for all of us that at 18, you don't quite know as much as you think you do, and you just jump headfirst into these things. So I was certainly in that boat. I was a kid from a small town in Oregon, very modest upbringing, terrific parents, and going to the West Point, the United States Military Academy, represented a real opportunity. And I never, as much as I may not have liked the day-to-day, I never lost sight of what that represented for me, and it's never disappointed in that way.
I always think about mindset and discipline. Would they be fair things, fair values to consider when you're in a situation like that?
No question. And I think a lot of what, we're going to talk about today, I use, the word that's popular today, which I like a lot, but is grit,
Grit, yes.
And I think we all want it. Probably all think we need more of it, but grit is a word that jumps to mind is what the military really helps shape, because you got to have a fair amount of it to get through some days.
Well, what's the minimum term there? Is it 3 years?
So 4 years of school, and then 5 years of a commitment to the Army after you finish that.
Fantastic. So what happened on the very, very last day? What did you do with yourself? Like a fish out of water?
Yeah, well, I think I joke, and it's half joking, that's part of the reason I went back to business school when I got out of the Army is, it bought me 2 more years to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I got to kind of cheat a little bit and go back to the school environment and work hard, but it provided a bit of a safety net or a transition point, if you will, for getting out in the quote-unquote real world.
Well, tell us a little bit about your educational background and, what you've gone ahead and done.
Sure. So I went to West Point. I was actually, in my 5 years in the Army, I was in finance, which, people may think it's a little bit like military intelligence and oxymoron, but it's real. It's out there. It's a thing. And so knew I wanted to serve my time and get out, and find, actually the things I did in the military were not I wouldn't call them business oriented, but certainly relevant, and wanted to get into something where I could have what I'll call P&L responsibility quite quickly in the corporate setting. I knew whatever I was going to do was going to be brand new. Like a lot of things, I think for a lot of us, didn't know what direction that was going to be. Ran into a friend who was in real estate, did not take any real estate classes in business school. I went to business school at Yale, and great experience. It was really great people, great 2 years. And so from when I graduated in 06 to when I left Parkway, the company I was with in 2019, and a lot of what we'll talk about after that, but I was just learning the commercial real estate sector of office, and so that was, and I learned it from the ground up. I went to a company where the CEO didn't mind giving P&L responsibility. He loved and really sought leadership experience and valued that, but he wanted you to be willing to kind of roll your sleeves up and
get into it.
And that's what I did. Learned it from the ground up. And it's, as I joke with some people, it's one thing to study mergers and acquisitions, it's another to live them. And so I got to live through a few of those during my time there.
I wonder, throughout all of this, I often talk about exposure to risk, both personally and professionally, and taking chances, and being willing to fail. What have you learned from failure, do you think?
I would say there's two parts to that, Rick. I think there's this, the risk and the failure I learned in a corporate setting, which I would say is a different brand of it. I don't think, at least for me, it was so personal. I'd like to think I treated everybody else's money like it was my own, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't. And then there's a whole nother element of that, which is when I left in 2019 with no safety nets personally and said, I'm going to go study the future of work. And it led to Workng. That's I think during this era, I have learned a whole nother level of appreciation for entrepreneurs and just what it takes. And I've heard no more than the last 3 years than I think I heard my whole life. And there's a lot on the line. There's a lot at stake, and so I don't know if that's a good answer, but
no, absolutely.
Those are the two buckets because I really thought I was being calculated and I was taking on risk when I was with Parkway, and we were.
Yep. But
it was kind of a group of us, and I was not personally on the hook for it, and I took it very seriously, and I lost a lot of sleep over it, but it
is
ended
what
up.
It is.
It is very different than when you're on your own and there is no safety net.
Well, look, there's a lot of people on this call today. They're either startup entrepreneurs or struggling small to medium-sized business owners who are looking to people like you who have essentially walked the path before them. Now, part of that is to understand, is it important to, look after yourself and maybe what a daily routine might look like for you? Would you be willing to share that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's ebbed and it's flowed, and part of this story and my story, one, it's a work in progress, which probably everybody says, but it truly is. And part of what happened in this season for me was doing a personal reset, and I think that discipline that was such a saving grace for me for so long actually probably started to work against me a little bit because. To achieve and to do all the things LinkedIn said I needed to do to keep my career going in the direction it needed to go, I had woken up one day around 2018 or 19. I had two daughters who were getting close to middle school. And that routine that you alluded to had me getting up at 3:15 in the morning.
Wow.
So I could be working out and work by 5 so I could make it home by dinner. But as you can already sense, the version of me that my family got at 6 was not a very good version.
I can imagine.
And so it's funny, Rick, routine now, it's at 6. And in some ways, the Army part of me thinks it's just a complete violation of everything I know to get up at 6. But it, now involves getting the girls, helping them get to school and the car rides and the conversation. That's part of the reason I wrote the book and this moment, the legacy business, is I just needed it for myself as a bit of a rallying cry, because I think, and I'm a work in progress. Like I said, we could talk in a year and talk about, well, Workng was a good idea, but it never actually succeeded. But I've had to come to terms with, I would rather have attempted and failed than have been where I was in the corporate setting, dying a little bit every day, making good money.
Yeah, that's really sage advice. Thank you very much for opening up, because one thing I know, that from a business perspective, fundamentally things don't change too much, but what does change is people's journey, the leaders behind those businesses. And that's why I think the My Future Business Show is so different, because we take a bit of time to look at that. Now, somewhere along the line, I got this impression that I needed to ask you this question. What makes life worthwhile for you, do you think, now? Given what you know, and your family and your daughters, and at the end of the day, what would it be?
I think it's establishing, everybody's got to do it for themselves, but establishing a set of priorities that become non-negotiables.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's always going to be faith and a belief in God at the top, and then it's going to be family and really close friends, and then somewhere beyond that comes work, which initially, especially with a type A personality, you think, oh, I can't do it all, and do it all as well as I want to. But the truth is, for me, when I got those out of order, I ended up not being very good at work anyway, even if I put it ahead of everything else. And so that continues to be, even as recent as yesterday, I ran into somebody I hadn't seen in quite a while and done a lot of deals with them. And, we were having this exchange, and the notion that work never loves you back, right? I mean, it's
always taking.
Yeah. And so I think for me, because I will always, and I'm not walking away from some of the really true core values that I've always placed in high regard. I mean, even in the book, I have a chapter called Hard Work, and I have a chapter called Excellence, because this is not an excuse to not do well in work. It's, for me, it's become, and that schedule that you alluded to is, I need to get more out of every minute. I can't stretch this task out for 20 if I could do it in 10, because I have something to do with those other 10 minutes now.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, it seems to me that you've had to learn to detune and decompress occasionally. What do you do with either on your own or with your family to relax? What do you like doing?
Look, we love anything outdoors. We just returned from a trip to Colorado, which is, for me, in the summer. I'm less of a winter Colorado person. I'm more of a summer Colorado. So I've always been active. I find, exercise and especially as our daughters have gotten older, I've noticed as we've gone to Colorado, it's been easier and easier to do bike rides, because we can all keep up with each other. Now I'm worried I'm going to get behind.
Look out, here they come.
That's right. But in those, I think in those moments, what I used to probably assume is I compartmentalize, and I'd say, well, we could talk, and then we'll get done with that, and then we could go do a bike ride or run. But the truth is, those two can happen simultaneously. With in our case, family is some of the most meaningful conversations happen on a bike ride. They happen on a walk. They happen on an activity. And so, really, in the last couple of years, tried to embrace that and focus on making moments count, and not rushing through one to get to another, and being in the moment itself.
That's fantastic feedback. Thanks again for sharing. Life is not a dress rehearsal, is it? Now, I wonder, as a leader, not only in business, but as a father, what do you think your girls are learning from you? What do they see?
Ooh, boy, I should have known better, because I got done with the West Point experience, and told people I in some ways you learn more about leadership from how not to do it than you do from how to do it in some ways. So to assume that's not happening at the house, is probably not being honest with myself. But I hope there's a mixed bag of the actual verbal, the communication, and then obviously the modeling it. And then, honestly, Rick, it's what I've learned over time is just owning the fact that it's not always going to be perfect, and being willing to, just like I would at work. I don't know why it's hard to do it at home sometimes. Say,
I know.
Hey, look, Dad messed up.
Yep,
I didn't respond as well as I should have. I didn't.
Could have, yes.
And here, I know we talked to you about it, so it's only fair that you and I, I'd come clean with you, and together we're going to get better in
Yeah.
this way. And so that's been for me a positive. It doesn't seem like I'd rather do it all right, but the truth is none of us do.
None of us do.
And how am
No.
I going to deal with that?
You know what? I see a man who lives his truth. Would you agree with that? Do you think you're comfortable in your truth?
I sure hope so. The word that means a lot to me when I see people, and I certainly want to be somebody that somebody can say about me, is authentic, right?
Authentic.
And that
Yep.
was the thing about my biggest fear and kind of laying it out there in the book like I wrote is to have somebody read it and go, wow, I'm shocked, Mike. That's nothing like you, like the you I know at all.
A disconnect. Yeah.
A disconnect. And so that's been really important. It's not perfect, but it's authentic, because I think in today's world, or I think I know, we're all dying for authentic. We know all the other things that are out there, and most of them not terribly
And there's
positive. But
lots of rubbish around.
the authentic people, boy, those are valuable ones. They
Mm.
are for me, and I
Hmm.
certainly want to be that for others.
I'm absolutely loving this call now. I'd love to switch gears if you might. Back in 2014, you were part of putting in the first WeWork in Texas. I'd love to talk about that experience and, as a result, what happened after that.
It the two-word answer is game changer, and I'll expand from there.
Yep.
Is it was birthed. We had bought a company out of LA, Thomas Properties, that included 5 assets, 5 high rises in downtown Austin, which for me was a dream. I mean, my wife and I met in Austin. I loved Austin, and candidly, Rick, it was not what we think of it today. Today, it's just amazing. I mean, it's
Yep.
seemingly resilient to any sort of headwind. It's just still on fire. But in 14 and 13, there was really a question mark around Austin whether it was going to be the early 2000 bust version of tech that would
Yep.
show up
Yep.
there, or was this something for real? And we now know it certainly seems to be something much more real. And all the buildings I'd inherited, we bought them out of some distress.
Hmm.
And there were law firms and lobbyists leaving behind wood paneling, leaving downtown Austin to go to the burbs. And I was just the guy that had to asset manage and run the portfolio and make it perform. And I'm looking around, and I got to know Capital Factory, which is one of the more well-known U.S.-based incubators out there for new companies. And it was very curious to me, Rick. You would study the life cycle of a company. You and I decide we want to start a company. We would go to a place like Capital Factory, find venture capital, get funded. And then my observation was people quickly figured out I need to get out of this environment. It was great to get started, but I need my own place. And there wasn't a place for them to go. So I started
Ah.
asking friends, and I said, hey, and they would joke with me. They said, well, Mike, we're not ready for one of your big boy leases. And by that they meant what you and I probably talk a little bit more about, which is the problematic nature of commercial office as it still is today, which is we only know how to do about 1 or 2 things. And it's mostly long-term big leases. That's how
Yep.
these things get financed. And
Hmm.
but back in 14, you could kind of see, okay, something's not quite right here. And so I asked these guys, I said, okay, I get it, but I like what you're doing. I hate that I'd lose track of you. Where are you going right now? And he goes, oh, we're signing leases in apartments.
Wow.
And I said, is that even legal? And he goes, I don't know.
Just doing it.
And because there was just that
There's
limited of
nothing
options.
around.
There was nothing around. So we had an old club in one of the buildings right there in Congress. It's right near the state capitol.
Hmm.
And I called our CEO at the time and I said, man, we should break this up. It's not been leased. I'm looking, it hasn't been leased in 5 or 10 years. So we're not getting any income. We should break this up into small suites. We should somehow figure out how to run it differently than the rest of the building, do short-term agreements with these guys so we don't lose track of them. And when they're ready to commit to, something bigger and better, we'll be in a better place to do it. We kind of laughed, said, yeah, we can't do that. And so we had a partner and they said, well, Mike, maybe we should go to New York. There's this new thing called co-working, this new group called WeWork. And it sounds like they do what you're describing. And that was how it started. I
Wow.
didn't know the guy running around in the hoodie in this building in New York we met was the guy in charge who they'd make a movie about someday.
Yeah, wow.
And we got done with that deal, Rick. And I remember I called our COO again. I said, I've learned two things out of this. I said, one is I never want to do a deal with those guys again. Um, but two, this is a game changer. What's going on? This may not, and I always told people, because I got a lot of questions after that, I said, WeWork might be MySpace and not Facebook, but they've kicked in the back door in an industry that really needed the back door kicked in.
Yes.
And they had the personality to do it. What made them really difficult to deal with also was the only kind of personality that could fight their way through a very entrenched industry.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Can I ask you then, this is obviously embedded with innovation. What sort of importance do you lay on innovation in the work that you do, and what part will it play in the future of your business?
Yeah, I think, innovation is such a all-encompassing word that
It's very generic, isn't
probably
it?
it is. And I think, in some ways and again, just my humble opinion, we probably overcomplicated and, we want to see cars flying around and we think unless they are, then we haven't
It's no
really
good. Yeah.
innovated. And what I found, because I used to tell our team all the time and still is I would rather move forward with an 80% solution than sit around not ever moving, waiting for 100%, which
Yes.
I saw a lot. And innovation to me sometimes, Rick, it wasn't some gee whiz new technology. A lot of what I was studying was what I call psychology.
Yep.
In what we saw in COVID, I could see, I didn't know what it was. I didn't describe it, but you would just intuitively go, people are driving an hour or two one way on each end of the day, 5 days a week to get to this.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And so so when we got done with WeWork, I started studying things like even as simple as a dentist office, because there were just, what is the hassle factor in life that makes everything, more difficult? Well,
Yep.
and what makes it difficult for a company? What truly makes productivity and efficiency a problem for a company? It's the things in life that if I'm coming to work 5 days a week, if I'm driving 1 or 2 hours a week, heaven forbid, I got to get out of the office twice a year to go get my teeth checked, which we all should be,
You're
hopefully getting our
doing.
teeth checked.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's time, it's travel, it's absence from family, it's all those things, isn't it?
It is, and it's just generically, So the next year we did one of the first food halls
Mm.
in Texas in downtown Austin, and we used a very well known, just a super amazing architect for restaurants and stuff there locally. I remember he and I met in New York, and we met at a food hall, which was awesome. It was just a fascinating experience. And I remember we were sitting there, and I said, "Okay, Michael, tell me how you design." He goes, Mike, I view space as an emotional regulator. And I said, that sounds amazing. I'm going to use it over and over again. So I'm just going to come clean and
What do you
ask you
mean?
to explain. What do you mean by it? And he said, no, he goes, look, it's simple. He goes, human beings put themselves in spaces that best match their mood and their task.
Yeah. Wow.
And he goes, I just want to build space that allows for that emotional regulator to be achieved. And that's from that, really between those 2 years where I just started chasing it down. And I would, we did.
He gave you your
I
mission, didn't he?
Yeah, no,
Almost.
and again, it was dentists, and then that started to bleed into, well, how are we operating? How are
Mm.
we operating these assets? I mean, because I was running a team of about 100 plus between Austin and we went through another merger and it became just Houston.
Mm.
And I realized, half of it is the physical changes we make to the asset, but really it's the way in which we operate this. And then over time, and you can see it in some of my viewpoints in Workng, is the idea that the office sector would outsource the most valuable future of the industry in terms of the WeWorks and stuff to the WeWorks just made less and less sense.
Yeah, of course.
Because you were giving up learning, you were giving up data, you were giving up pricing power in exchange for just not having to deal with the hassle. Well, the hassle is the bread and butter and
It's
the
the
future of your
core.
entire industry.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's not hard to see, is it?
But it continues. I mean, it's still up in the air whether a platform and Workng just, as a little bit of background. I left in 19. I was burnt out. I was COO. I really needed to do a reset personally, but I also just realized, and a lot of people on this call can appreciate this. I joked at the end that I spent so much time telling everybody and all the masters I was serving what I was doing. I actually didn't have time to do anything anymore.
Yeah, the butter's too thin on the bread, wasn't it?
That's right. And I hadn't. You talk about innovation. I realized I was probably 4 years removed from the WeWork. We'd done one of the first co-working deals in Houston, which was even harder to do.
Yep.
And just getting all of those things through the apparatus and the approval levels, and we were going through ownership changes, and it was just unbelievable.
Painful.
It was so challenging, and so I wanted to be able to step back. I wanted to be able to think again. I wanted to be able to talk and learn and go chase down the people that I had the most respect for, and that's what I did the fall of 19.
Yep.
And I still remember, it was funny, I was sitting in a coffee shop with Lisa Picard, who is one of the more forward-leaning, and that's being understating it, leaning people in the future of work space. And so I remember she and I were just kind of trading notes, and this was December of 19, and I said, so what are you thinking about for next year? She goes, Mike, I think 2020, I'm really going to spend a lot of time thinking about work from home. And I remember going, man, I've heard it, but nobody's talking about this. I love it. What do you, and she goes, no, I just don't get it. She goes, we think the competition is the building like ours down the street. She goes, the competition is the computer in somebody's house when somebody figures out most of the work and get done there.
Yes, sir. Now, I was going to ask you about that in terms of the asset component to Workng. I can see a future where you're providing that infrastructure as well inside of your offerings. Is that something that you're likely to do given the nature of COVID and how things are changing in terms of people's behavior and work practices and thoughts around this topic?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the guy I ran into yesterday, he was asking me what I was doing. And I said, I'm really helping owners and operators, figure out what works looks like going forward. And he kind of laughed and he said, well, nobody knows that. And I go, no. I said, no, it's true. I said, I certainly don't claim to. I said, the good news for me is the owners and operators seem to know even less than I do. So, there's something, something here for me to do. And he represents a lot of big enterprise users. He and I were on the other side of the table from a lot of deals. And I said, and your clients have no idea what's going on either. So, we're all blind together. and so I think there's this notion, and you see it a lot when I look online, of all or nothing. Like, we're all going to work from home and never go back to the office, or we're all going to, owners or employers are going to have their way, and we're going to just demand everybody come back. And that doesn't, the world's never that clean. And to me, and again, it's part of the reason there's hopefully a connection even between the book and things I wrote, is the one thing I do know personally, and I just think through observation, is humans don't do particularly well by themselves all the time.
No.
And community is of high value. And even if it's 3 days a week, even if it's whatever, you just have to give people a reason to come together. I think it's going to be about quality, not quantity. I think there have been productivity slips. I think, whether you've got a dog, a kid, or whatever, there are distractions that just make, at times it difficult to work. But the having just got back from Colorado, and you could just feel and sense people are craving something different than they had before COVID, and certainly something different than they've had between that and now.
Yeah.
And so the world of office, and I do a lot of white papers that you've probably seen on Workng,
I have.
generally are anchored around the necessary leadership within the industry to kind of help lift us through that transitional period.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack on that very topic alone, and it's certainly something I'm seeing locally where very close friends are having those conversations. So I appreciate your input on that. Now, if we can shift gears once again and talk about your wonderful book, The Legacy Business. Now, where did this come from? Why did you choose the name? And did you enjoy writing it?
No, there's some good questions, and if I miss any,
No, we can
just
cover
come
them
back to
again.
it. So it was birthed out of an experience I had. I was not everybody is, but I was very fortunate to have grandparents and parents that just invested a lot into me. And, I think like most of us, you probably, if you've been in that environment, underappreciate it until you get older. I mean, that's just the reality. And you
Yeah,
definitely
absolutely.
really, once you have children, most of us go running back to our parents and go, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea."
You're such you're a superhero.
That's right. That's
How
right.
did you do it?
You're so smart again. How did this all work?
They're sitting there like the Buddha in the corner going, "I know."
They're enjoying every second of it. And so that moment for me was in 2004. I was on my way out of the Army, on my way to business school. My grandfather, I was at his memorial service, so he passed away, and the room was packed. He was part of the greatest generation, just an amazing person. But, he was my grandpa. Everybody thinks it was just me. It was me and my brother and my cousins. And the pastor in that setting asked that anybody that had been personally impacted by Paul, which is my grandfather's name, to stand up. In the room, there was just people all around the room, and I thought, wow, it was so much more than just me. He just made all of us in this room feel like we were the only ones. And even though, he was not a billionaire or, any sort of huge bank account per se, I just remember sitting there on my way to business school going, this is the business I should want to be in. This is a legacy business that he has started. He has passed it on to my mother. She's passed it on to me with my dad. And it's incumbent upon me to not lose sight of this. And so had that in the back of my mind, ran off to business school, got busy, was doing things as well as I knew and really trying to prioritize and do all those things. Similar experience. My dad had gotten cancer and he passed away in 2012. So it's very similar setting, and just it reminded me, I thought, man, same thing, same impact. And when I left in 19, because, in some ways I had lived out some of the things I said I wouldn't, it sat there for a while. We all went through 20, 20, I think I was just trying to chase my tail a little bit. And I got to the end of 20 and Workng had started, but it hadn't really taken off. My wife, who's always been a huge encourager, knew this idea was out there, and as good wives and true serum speakers can do, she said, dude, you got to write this. I mean, you write this down, you'll never have a moment like you had. And so I did. And so the first 3 months of 21, just every night I get to the back of the room and I'd hammer out another chapter, and it was just a unique Winderick. I don't know that I've ever been in a zone, so to speak, where I'm not saying this was the most amazing work ever, but where I really was as focused on something as I was with that. And it, I called some friends that had written books and talked to them and got a little smarter on the industry. It turns out the publishing industry is its own animal that I had no idea what I was getting into. I got into that.
You do now.
I do now. But I realized I did enjoy writing, and I realized it's a great outlet, especially in today's world, for people at their own leisure and their own space to sit and kind of digest what you're putting out. There's good feedback loops now where, relatively quickly. You can kind of know, look, that really resonated with people or that didn't, which is, between the book's a little slower. That's a different process. It kind of hides for a long time and then poof, it goes out at once. Whereas these,
Yep.
the white papers I do for Workng are on a, every 2 to 3 week basis, and I can get a little better, feedback. But yeah, true. Very, very appreciative for the window I had to be able to sit down and just get that down on paper while our girls were still at home. And
Yes.
It was good for me. I needed it. Yeah, that's right.
I think, that your partner, she's the multiplier, she's the equalizer. She's made you take that step forward. So congratulations to her on actually, poking the bear, as it were, to get that done. Yeah, and look,
absolutely. She was I joke with her because she did the first edit as well, and the publisher actually didn't have that many edits to make. And I told her, I said, man, you may have a future in this, because our girls' paper and my book, you may have a new gifting here.
Yeah, look, I've absolutely loved this call, Mike. You share so much wisdom about your journey and things for everybody to be aware of and consider as they maybe start their own business or write their own book. And I really appreciate it, as do the My Future Business audience. Now, importantly, where are people going to go, firstly, if they want to connect with you at Workng, and what is the process when they get there? And finally, where, if people want to get your book, will they get that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start the second question's easy. It's Amazon's probably the one people know best. I'm about, I think, knock on wood, the audio is about done.
Oh.
I don't consume it like that, but one of the other neat experiences was a lot of people do, and a lot of people enjoy it in the author's voice. So yeah. I did the audio recording, and thankfully it's about ready to go out. So
excellent.
I'll post that as well. But for now, Amazon is probably the easiest place to get it.
Yep.
And then Workng it's just www.workng without the I, so WORKNG.
Yes.
.com. Little side note, when names and logos is always just a beast of an exercise to go through. Yes. And so I had a group that I was kind of bouncing these things off of, and I thought it would be kind of clever to call it Reworked, but apparently I was the only one that thought that was very funny. So it's now Working without the I. I don't know which would have been harder to explain. That turns out Working without the I is a little harder than I thought it would be. But yeah, I try to make, we use the word authentic in that website, and try to have, there's content on there. I post all the white papers we put. People, want to get a hold of me on LinkedIn and different places. My email and everything's very accessible. It's just mfransen@workng.com, and people have not been shy to find me, and I always love getting those notes.
Fantastic. Again, I've loved this call. If you're on this call today with us, you've enjoyed what you've heard throughout the call. So many things that we've just touched the surface on. I've absolutely loved the call. If you want to reach out to Mike and his wonderful team, you'll visit Workng without the I. That's WORKNG.com. I will be making sure that link's available to you. No matter where you see this call, you'll find that link back to Workng. And again, if you want to grab the copy of the book, just visit Amazon. Now, with all that being said, Mike, what a wonderful call. Thank you very much for joining me on the My Future Business show today.
Thank you so much, Rick. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.